and see how things go. Okay, it's showing as live.
Okay, I'll let you know when I start seeing it on my actual YouTube player. And
Send a message out to
here you
chat.
go. I think it's coming through.
Awesome.
We are live, Ben. Benjamin.
Welcome, Ben.
Thank you.
So we're not going to start the stream for a little bit. Just going to have it be live. Welcome everyone in the chat.
Welcome, everybody. There's two Bens here today, Benjamin, of course, and Ben Tristram and Benjamin Anderson. So I'm Ben Tristram.
And
here to watch and learn.
Yeah, and I'm Benjamin Anderson. So we're just going to go by Ben and Benjamin. So I'll go by Benjamin and he'll go by Ben for now, just to try and keep it from getting too confusing. They think you're Sean Spalding. That's funny. No, not Sean Spalding today. He does good work too.
I wonder how many people here are from your audience, Ben, versus my audience. Probably many yours, as it's your YouTube channel. Who here considers themselves Benjamin's GameMaker audience versus Game Dev TV / Ben Tristram / Us Lot's audience? Just drop in the chat. Be interesting to know who we're talking to.
Yeah, we're a little bit.
You'll say both.
Yeah, we're a little bit combining forces, so it'll be curious to see where you guys came from. Whether you just came from my channel or Ben Tristram's channel. Let us know.
Underscore Ben. Yeah, one of us could be underscore Ben. What's this Sean business? How do I get a reputation as being Sean then?
You're from the same. Well, your accents are similar, is all I think.
Okay.
And only slightly, in my opinion, but yeah, it's not. Just to make sure that we're not impersonating Sean Spalding. This is Ben Tristram from Game Dev TV. It's not Sean Spalding.
Oh, okay. My voice is 30% louder than the other Ben. Okay. Good to know. So I will turn mine down. It's probably the easy way.
I can turn mine down a little bit, actually. Let me do that.
I think it's me that's too loud, so...
Well, I'm also going to be doing music and sounds in the game, and so if I can turn down my computer volume a little, it'll actually be better. How's our stream?
Okay.
Stream doesn't seem... How are you guys' stream going? There's a little bit of an experiment why we started early. Sean is in the chat. Welcome, Sean. I don't see where...
Hey, Sean, apparently, I don't know you, but apparently you're from a proper country too, so...
Oh, there he is. Yeah, he is in the chat. He's telling everyone to be quiet. He's in here spying. Spying on me. Okay, let's hope my internet... How is... Let's see. How can you do an executable file in GameMaker Studio 2? That's a good question, and we can answer that while we're waiting. If you come up to build, you can do create executable right here, and then you'll get different build options, and it depends on the target platform that you've selected over here. This little target icon, you can... Poor Sean, can't lurk anywhere. Anyways, this is where you can select your target platform depending on which platform you want to build to. Stream is running great. That's good. It's showing bad status on my end, so as long as it's running okay on your end, that's good to go. It's gonna be mostly coding, so we don't need a super high frame rate, but good to know. Will my Udemy course get bonus lectures? Do you mean my Action RPG Udemy course? If so, then I will be adding more content to the course, yes. Ben and I actually have some plans for some, not a lot of concrete stuff yet. There's a few things that I will definitely be adding, and then Ben and I have some ideas for some more things that we can add to it as well. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, certainly it's our culture to add to courses once they're out, once we get some feedback for people. So it'd be cool to bring that to the table a little bit.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've liked about Ben's courses, comparing them on Udemy, is he always puts a lot of work into updating and maintaining his current courses and bringing that added value to the students who have already purchased them.
That's the plan. They're so helpful. They keep telling us what's wrong with the courses and how we can improve. And that either means our courses are rubbish or that they're just trying to be helpful. I'm going to go with the latter.
Yeah, we can hope that's the case.
So we've got a question there. Ben Skywolf Alpha says, can you give your opinions on memes or memes or memes? I'm not sure how you pronounce it.
Well, I like some memes. I definitely think some go too far, but can someone
They
with
just
little
mean memes in
programming...
general, do they?
Yeah, I think so. Can someone with little programming experience benefit from your GameMaker Studio 2 RPG course? Yes, the course does move pretty quickly, but I do explain each new concept as best I can as they're added to the course. So you should be able to take it even if you've never programmed before. I would recommend a pretty solid understanding of math. Not that you have to be into advanced math, but if you feel like you've got math down pretty well. I guess what I'm saying is I wouldn't recommend it for a very young child that was still learning more common math concepts. But if you've got a pretty good understanding of math and you're okay with it moving a little faster or pausing and rewatching videos, then you should be good. All you need to know about is instance create depth is now a thing. Well, that's definitely the main thing to know about if you're coming from GameMaker Studio 1.4, because that is the thing that will throw most people off. Welcome, GM Wolf. Did I see you're in the chat too? The chat's calling everybody out. There you are. So just a little backstory for you, Ben Tristram. Sean Spalding was kind of the original tutorial creator on YouTube. He's done a whole bunch of amazing tutorials for GameMaker and continues to do them. Most of his tutorials are provided by his Patreon page, I think. And then GM Wolf has also started doing quite a few different tutorial videos, and they're all excellent content as well. There's a lot of people getting started in it.
Cool, thank you.
What happened to Grain War? Okay, that's the question that I always have to answer, huh? So, it's on indefinite pause right now. And that's pretty much it. We'll see what happens. It was a game that I started working on, for those who don't know. And I did end up getting it onto Steam Greenlight, but never actually did anything, never took any pre-orders or anything like that for it. And so the scope of the project was getting a little out of hand and put it on hold for a while. And we're probably about ready to start. It's 3:59, might as well get started now. So maybe we should introduce ourselves again. GM Wolf says, still can't match a lot of your content though. Thanks. I appreciate the compliment. It's good that we all have different teaching styles. I think the more people doing tutorial videos, the more people teaching, the better. Yeah. Your content is amazing. So keep up the great work. Okay. So let's do another introduction just for those who may have just gotten here. My name is Benjamin. I'll go by Benjamin in this video to help reduce confusion. And I've got Ben Tristram here with me from Game Dev TV.
Hey guys, I focus more on Udemy than I do on YouTube. So we have a pitiful appearance on YouTube, but we have about nearly 300,000 students over on udemy.com. And yeah, we focus mainly on Unity, Unreal, and Blender. But I'm here to learn about GameMaker. I'm also collaborating with Ben on a GameMaker course that we've just launched. So that's who I am. That's why I'm here, and I can't wait to hear all about it. And also, my job will also be to call out the places where I see GameMaker as lower friction and a better tool for the job for making simple 2D games when compared to particularly Unity, but also Unreal. So there you go.
Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I
No worries.
think that, so for this kind of video, I'm going to just kind of introduce GameMaker Studio 2. I'm going to be making a small game. It'll be similar to the space shooting game, because I had an older course for GameMaker Studio 1.4, and we'll be using some of the same resources and maybe building something a little bit similar to that. It won't be exactly the same game, and we'll be kind of doing it in GameMaker Studio 2 as an introduction. I've been excited to work with Ben Tristram because he's got a lot of existing students who are in the game development scene, and I'm excited for those students to learn more about GameMaker Studio 2 and see if it's a good fit for some of the project that they're tackling. Let's get started. So you guys, you can follow along. There's a link in the description that has the resources that I'll be using, and you should be able to do this in the trial version of GameMaker Studio 2. So if you wanted to try and follow along, you can. This video will be available. I'll make it available on YouTube afterwards so that you don't have to, if you want to follow along later, just kind of watch now, then come back later, then you should be able to do that as well. But if you're all ready to go, you could follow along at the same time.
Yeah, I'm going to do that, Ben. I'm going to follow along on a Mac just to be a rebel and to make sure it all works good on a Mac. And I've downloaded the resources and I'll be following along. So if I have any questions or anything that may be representative of other people's questions, I'll throw them up. And where I think GameMaker is amazing compared to, say, Unity, I'll highlight that as well, if that's okay.
Yep, sounds great. Okay, so we'll
cool.
start.
So I've got 3 folders: audio, background, and sprites. Yeah, that's all we need for the game, and a copy of GameMaker 2 or 1.4.
Yep. And
awesome.
I won't really be talking about GameMaker Studio 1.4 a lot, but if you are following along with GameMaker Studio 1.4 and have a question, feel free to ask. So let's do getting started. We'll create a new project, and it gives you 2 options. You get drag and drop or a GameMaker language project. And for this, we'll be jumping right into GameMaker language. It's scripting language. It's pretty easy to learn and pick up. So I highly recommend it. The drag and drop can be useful as well, but as I just prefer GameMaker language, and I feel like it's not too tricky to get into. So we'll create our project name. I'm just going to call it Blaster Faster, which is the original name that it was before. And you'll see GameMaker will generate a new project for you. And we'll talk a little bit about this. So we have our workspace here, and GameMaker has GameMaker Studio 2 has the biggest changes, I guess, are visually and the way that it handles resources and displaying those resources. So we've got a nice workspace right here, and we can create and manipulate resources inside of this workspace. You can create multiple workspaces up here if you want to have some resources on one, some on another one, and switch between the two. When you're starting, I'd recommend just keeping one workspace at first. And I just want to answer this question here real quick. You ask, why do you have to pick? Why can you not use both? You actually can use both. And I can show you how to do that as we're doing this. So now the first thing we'll want to do is, well, we've got our resources over here, so I'm going to talk about that, and then we've got our kind of shortcut icons up here where we can run the game or stop the game or run it in debug mode. These are the main ones you'll be using. This icon right here is actually pretty useful as well. You can see that the inside of the IDE, or the inside of GameMaker Studio 2's editor, we've got some different windows that we can access right here, and you can click on these to show or hide them. And this button up here can also expand, and they're called panels, so it can also expand and hide docked panels. And so I'm currently running this at 720p, so my resolution's a little bit lower, which makes it feel just a little bit more cramped here. And so using this will be, it's very useful to know about this and the hotkey F12, especially if you're a slightly lower resolution. It can help clear up your screen. So I'm going to go to the resources, and hopefully we'll be able to just drag some of these resources into our project right here. And the different screen resolutions messing with me a little bit. Okay, so let's start with our sprites. And a sprite is just it's an image that we can use to represent one of our game objects. So I'm going to grab the ship sprite right here, and we should be able to just drag it into our resources panel, drop it, and let's see. There we go. I guess you have to drop it into the workspace. Okay, so drop it into the workspace, and then I'm going to hit F12 so I can see this a little bit better. You can navigate your workspace, and you can see by dragging it and dropping it into the workspace, it automatically created this new sprite resource, and you can see it listed over here in our sprites. Now you can navigate this workspace by holding the middle mouse button, and if you're on a laptop, I think there's another key that you can do it. You have to switch to laptop mode in order to do that. But you can navigate with the middle mouse button, and if you scroll, it'll scroll up and down. If you hold Control while you're scrolling and you're inside of your workspace, you can zoom in and zoom out inside of your workspace like this. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit.
And that's Command on a Mac for the zoom.
It's Command on a Mac? Okay, good to know.
Yeah, it's generally always Command or on Command/Control for Mac PC compatibility. It's the same button.
So now that we've got, you can see that it actually named it after the sprite. So I've got it named s_ship in here, and it automatically named our resource s_ship here as well. And there's some information about this sprite that we need to change before we're done working with it. And that's going to be the sprite origin. And the sprite origin basically determines where the sprite is drawn inside of your game, at what reference point it's drawn. And I generally like to set mine, especially for a game like this, just to middle center, so it's in the very center of the sprite. Whenever we do anything with the sprite, its origin, or the flipping point of the sprite, will be the very center. So if you were to rotate this sprite or do any sort of manipulation to the sprite, scaling it, it would always rotate and scale on this axis right here in the center. And we will, that's pretty much all we need to do for this one currently. We'll come into collision masks a little bit later, but let's just get started with this. So we've created our first sprite. Now we need to create an object that we can assign that sprite to. And the sprite contains the image, while the objects can contain the logic for our image. Now there's a few different ways you can create a new object. I like to just right click on objects right here and do create object, but you can see there's also a shortcut Alt-O which can create an object. So we'll do that. Create a new object. And I'm going to name this object O_ship. And the way that you name your resources is kind of up to you. Some people like to use OBJ. Some people like to use just like a capital S like this. Some people like to do OS like this. And it really doesn't matter how you decide to name your resources as long as you distinguish them from each other, because a sprite can't have the same name as an object. So you have to make sure that they're different from each other, which is why I use the simple single letter in the front, is to make sure that they're different. So then we can assign a sprite to this object. So we'll just do select a new sprite and select the ship. And now this object has a sprite assigned to it. And the next resource that we need to be made aware of is a room. And GameMaker Studio 2 automatically creates your first room for you. So I'm just going to rename this one. If you want to rename a resource in the tree over here, in the resource tree, you can just hit F2 and it will allow you to rename it. I'm going to name it R_1 for room 1. And double click on it to open it up. Now rooms are generally opened into a new tab. You can see up here, we had our workspaces up here. It also opens a room as it's kind of its own workspace. So we can come into our room right here on this tab. And once we've, this is a little bit of a different thing for GameMaker Studio 2. Inside of GameMaker Studio 1.4, you used to just create objects from the room editor over here, but now you can just drag your object from here into the room. So you can drag it from your resource trees into the room. And if you want to create multiple, you can hold Alt and create a bunch in the room by holding Alt. And if you want to delete multiple, you can hold Shift and select them all and delete them all. Press delete to remove them all. But we'll just create it in the room right now, and we'll change our room size down here on the left hand side inside of our room editor tab. You can change the size of the room. There should be a width and a height, and we'll make the width 320. Well, let's see, let's make the height 320 and the width 180. This is going to be a pixel art game, so we're going to want our room to be quite small, and we're going to need to move our ship over. Okay. Now another important thing to note is that if you, by mistake, click on the background layer right here instead of the instances layer, you won't be able to drag your object into the room. And this is because rooms are set up on a layer system, and certain layers can only contain certain elements. And layers that are above, in this list right here, layers that are above other layers are drawn first. So if I grab my background layer and draw it up, drag it up above the instances layer, all of a sudden you can't see the ship anymore. And that's because the background is being drawn on top of the ship. So this layer system is important to remember and important to know about. And it's very useful and very powerful, but you do need to be aware of it because it can mess you up if you're trying to create objects and you can't. It may be because you're on the wrong layer. Okay. So we've created our ship. Let's add some logic to it. I'm going to come into my ship object, and I want to show you a cool little trick that everybody talks about. So I'm going to close out of the room for now. And we're going to do Control T. So Control T is probably one of the easiest ways to navigate your workspace if you have a lot of things going on at one time. You can use Control T to search for something inside of your workspace. So let's say I have the ship open, the sprite for the ship, and I also have the object for the ship open. And currently they're right next to each other, but if I mess up my workspace and have it clear over here and I can't find my ship object, a real nice quick shortcut to get to it is just Control T. And Ben Tristram's saying Command T on Mac. So if I need to get to my ship object, I can do object ship and get right there, and it will take me to the ship object. You can also use the resources tree over here to navigate between them. So I can double click on my ship, sprite, or double click on my ship object and navigate between the two. And we're going to be dealing with the ship object for now. Now GameMaker is set up in Tomahawk 1, 2, 3, 4. You ask, are background sprites now? Yes. Yes. And I'll show you how that works inside of this video as well. So we need to add some logic to our ship, and GameMaker handles logic through what are called events. And there are a lot of different events that you can take advantage of. And for now, we're going to be using the keydown event. So we'll use, if you come into your object events, there's a little icon right here you can click to show. You can click add event, do keydown, right. And this event, or the code inside of this right here, will only run when the right key is being pressed on the keyboard. So whatever code is inside of here will only run when the right key is being pressed. So we're just going to attempt to move our ship to the right when it's being pressed. And we're going to do this by manipulating the ship's X position. So inside of the room, if we come back to our room here, we'll double click on it. You can see we're kind of set up on a grid here. And this grid is made up of X and Y coordinates. And our ship has a specific X and Y coordinate that it's on. And if you double click on the ship right here, you can actually see its X and Y coordinate. It's at X position 96 and Y position 256. And we can manipulate these variables on our ship object. So if we come back to our workspace, we can change the ship's X position. And you can do this by doing X plus equals, we'll do 2 for now, and do a semicolon at the end. I generally recommend doing semicolons, even though they aren't always required. But just to be safe, it's a great way to do it. Now we're at a point where we can actually run our game. So if you come up here to the very top, you'll see the run icon, the little play button, or you can also hit F5 to run the game. So I'm kind of starting this, and if you press the right key, your ship will move to the right. So I'm kind of starting this pretty slow pace, but I am going to speed it up just here in a little bit. Once I get some of the fundamentals down, we'll be speeding things up. So some of you might ask, why not just do X equals 2? And if you're brand new to programming. And let's just run the game and show you what happens if you do X equals 2 instead of X plus equals 2. And you can see our ship jumps clear over to the left. So what that's doing is it's setting our X position to 2. Let's do it as 4. Then it would set the X position to 4. And instead of moving us to the right. So X plus equals is relative. So it adds 4 to our current X position instead of setting our current X position. Okay, now let's try adding a new event. So we'll add an event. We'll do key press. We'll do key down left. And in here we can do X minus equals 2. Save the game. You can do that just pressing save up here or Control S. Run it with F5. And now our character can move both to the left and to the right. Feels kind of slow. But if we want to change these, we're going to have to change it in both places. Right here and right here. There's a better way. And the way that we do that is by creating variables. So we'll add an event, we'll do a create event. And this create event is the code inside of this event is only run when this object is very first created or initialized as an instance in the game. So it's only run when it's very first created. So inside of here, we can use this area to create new variables. Objects have some built-in variables like the X variable that we're manipulating, but we can also create our own. So we'll create one called speed. And you can see when we type out the word speed, it actually highlights it in green and says this is a built-in variable. So we don't want to use this one because it has a little bit of baggage that comes along with it. Mainly if you set this variable, it will start moving immediately every single frame. And so we don't need that for this. We may use it later. So in order to make this our own variable, I'm just going to put an underscore at the end. And we'll set our speed equal to 4. Now, instead of moving by these, I guess you'd call these magic numbers here, 2 and 2, we can copy this speed variable right here, and we can paste it in both of these places. And then if we ever want to change our speed on either of these two events, all we have to do is update it right here in our create event. We can run the game.
Ben, just a couple of things for people who are complete beginners. Firstly, it took me a little while to find the running the game is at the top of the screen, pretty obvious, but F5 or function F5 on a Mac. The other thing was, how do we create that variable again?
So come up to your creative, add a new event, and then add a create event. And this create event...
okay, it's a create event. Okay, that's a little counterintuitive. Cool, awesome. And also, I wanted to say at this stage, already we're seeing some benefits of GameMaker over more powerful engines like Unity, because the fact they've committed purely to 2D, there's two things that struck me so far as really significantly simpler than trying to do this in Unity. One is the input binding. This is incredibly simple. It's already built in. It's a lot simpler than Unity. The other thing is just the way that we're moving this object just by saying x plus equals 2. It couldn't be any simpler than that. In Unity, you're messing around with transforms and transform positions and translating them and object orientation and all sorts of layers of complexity. Very useful when you get to more complex stuff, but this is super simple for moving a sprite around, so nice to see.
Yeah. There's a lot of benefits to the way Unity does that, but when you're dealing with a small game like this, potentially, and with a 2D character, some of the time all you need to do is just manipulate their X position, their coordinates on the screen, and not have to deal with the extra things that come along with Unity. But yeah, it's fast. So yeah, once you've created the variable inside of this create event, you can create variables outside of a create event, I should clarify, but it's not recommended because first of all, you have to track down when it was created, and then it's gonna be weird because you could potentially get an error if you try and access that variable before it's created. So let's actually create some new sprites here. And I like to, when I'm done using certain objects and sprites, I like to clean up my workspace by doing right click, window, close all. And it just closes all of the windows that I currently have open in the workspace. And that's if I'm done using those for now. So then we can come back into our resources here. And since I'm going to use Control and click on all of these resources, I wonder how it's going to handle. I think since those are named with the strip, it should import those correctly. Drag them all into the workspace. And you can see that GameMaker automatically imports all of these images in for us. So we'll come up here. And these first two images are UI images. We may not end up using those in this tutorial because we've only got, or this live session, I guess, because we've only got about an hour. So let's do, for our enemy laser, we're going to center these sprites. And We'll just choose middle center on, oops, I chose the wrong one on that one. Okay, middle center, there we go. And I'd actually be curious to check if there's a way to set the default. Oh, this one can be top left as well because it's a UI element. And these are UI elements. It doesn't matter as much, but I generally leave them as top left. Middle center. This one I'm just going to kind of click in the middle of this circle right here. So it'll be a custom one, but you can, this is the explosion center sprite. You can set your own origin just by clicking anywhere on the image. And for this one, the center is actually kind of off-centered on the explosion, so I'm just going to kind of visually set it in the center. So we've got that. And once we've got all those imported, we can come into our resources again and come into our backgrounds and import in the two backgrounds. So click on those, drag them in, and press this to... These don't need to be centered, they can both be top left. And you can keep the B underscore if you want, that shouldn't matter. Okay, now let's use our background. And we'll come into our rooms and we'll come into our background layer. For this background layer, our very first one, we're going to set it to a color because it's a little boring to have the black background like this. So I'm going to set it to kind of a purple color, but a dark purple like this. Then I'm going to create another background layer, and you can do this right here inside of the room editor. Under the layers list, there are layer icons, and this one right here is create new background layer. Gonna do that. You can see this layer is drawn on top of our other background layer, and it's completely white. We'll call this, you can rename these as well by doing F2. Background, well, we'll just call it stars far. Now you can assign a sprite to a background, so we can come to our sprites here, or our background properties I should say, right here, and do click on the no sprite button. And inside of here you can choose background stars far, and you can see that it adds that background into our room. Now we want this image to tile. So if you look in the background properties again, the properties for the layer, there's a horizontal tile and a vertical tile. We don't actually need to tile it horizontally, but we do want to tile it vertically, and that will tile it down for us. You can also set, if you scroll down a little bit, a horizontal speed and a vertical speed. We're going to set a vertical speed of 1. Save the game and run it. And you can see the background is now moving, scrolling downwards. We're going to create another background layer, and we'll do our close stars for this one. So rename it close stars, and come into our sprite. We'll select stars close. This one needs the vertical tile as well, and we'll set our horizontal speed to 2 or 3 maybe for this one. Let's see. And this will create not our horizontal, excuse me, our vertical. And this will create a parallax effect with our stars. And it can make it feel like our spaceship is moving through space, even though we're actually currently not moving through space. And you can speed that up as you need. So I might speed it up to 5 actually, and speed up the the far away stars to something more like 3. But this is just personal preference. Can you set backgrounds to a float value, background speeds? Let's try it. You couldn't in GameMaker Studio 1.4. I haven't tested it in GameMaker Studio 2. Let's see. It looks like you can. It appears that you can. So you for sure can inside of code as well, but inside of the editor, I wasn't sure. So now we've got our backgrounds moving. Let's have our ship create some lasers. We'll add that behavior because we're about halfway through our event right now, our stream, and I want to make sure that we can get the game into kind of a basic working state. It won't be like a completed, finished game, but we can get it to a basic working state. So come back to our ship object, and we're going to add an event right here. Well, let's do this in a different way. First, let's create a new object. So right-click and do create new object. Right-click on the objects in the resources and create new object. We'll name this O_laser. And we'll give it a new sprite, which will be S_laser for the sprite. And we want this laser to move upwards. And this is one of the places where we can take advantage of some of GameMaker's built-in variables and built-in logic. So we'll add an event to this laser. We'll add a create event. And there's a built-in variable called vSpeed. And we'll set this laser's vSpeed equal to -10. Now, the vertical speed built-in variable will be automatically applied to our Y position every single frame. So we don't actually have to write that logic. We can take advantage of this built-in variable and do it ourselves. And sometimes you'll want to take advantage of built-in variables, and sometimes you'll want to avoid them. It depends on the kind of project that you're working on. This is one of the cases where this laser doesn't need complex collisions and collision detection. Basically, we'll just detect whether the image is overlapping the enemy image, and if it is, we'll run the collision code. And so because of that, we can use built-in variables and not have to worry about it. So once we've done that, we can have our ship create the laser. And I'm going to come into our ship object, add an event. This time we'll use the key pressed event instead of the key down event, which means we'll only fire a laser when the keyboard key is pressed down in the one frame where it's pressed down. If they hold it down, it won't continue to fire. And we could change that later, but for now we'll just use key pressed, and we'll use the space key. And here's the part that's going to be different from GameMaker Studio 1.4 for everyone, and the kind of joke that they were talking about at the start, which is if we want to create our laser object, we have to use a function called instance create layer. Okay? And this is the first time I'm introducing a function, so I might as well explain kind of what functions do. A function is, if you middle click on it, it'll open it up in the help file. But a function just allows you to run some game logic. You give it a little bit of information about how it should do that, and then it will handle the tricky stuff for you behind the scenes, so you don't have to worry about that. You just give it the basic information. And for instance create layer, we have an X position, which is where we want to create the instance, an X position and a Y position. A layer ID which refers to, if we come back to our workspace, or our room, I mean, the layers inside of our room here. So it's actually just this name, instances. And we also have the object that we want to create, which in this case will be O_laser. So come back to the workspace. And you can see the information that you need to give to the function down here at the bottom. Instance create layer at the bottom of this window right here. So first we'll do X. And we want to create this laser from our current X position, the ship's current X position for now. So we'll do X and Y, our current X position, our current Y position. Yes, there will be a saved recording of this for later, so you can check that out. Our layer is going to be instances, and remember, this is just a name, and I've put quotes around this. This is just the name of our layer inside of our room. So if you have a different name there, then you'll want to use a different name. And the object is object laser. And that's it. And we can save the game and run it. And now every time we press the space key, it will create a laser. And it looks like we've got an error message here. Oh, it's because I've got a typo. Okay. It's always good to read error messages, even though they can be a little bit confusing looking. They actually tell you a lot. So at GML object inside of the ship key pressed event right here at line 1 on our instance create, it says specified layer instance does not exist. So it's saying this layer doesn't exist. And that's true because if you look at our room, it's called instances with an S. So we just come back into our code right here where we create the layer and set that to instances and run the game. Now when we press space, we should be able to create a laser and it shoots up towards the top of the screen. Now these lasers, there's an issue with them, which is that they go on forever and they never get destroyed. So that will create a huge, I guess, memory leak, you could call it, inside of your game. It's basically going to be using memory and processing power on that laser forever off into space. And if you get thousands and thousands of layers, that's going to be a bad thing. So what we want is for this laser to remove itself when it's outside the game window. And there's actually an event for this. So you can do add event. And inside of other events, there's one called outside room. So add that event. So it's add event, other, outside room. And you can just run another function here called instance underscore destroy. And this function doesn't take any information or parameters, I guess. It can just be called the way it is. We don't have to give it any information. However, if you want to give it information, you can. But for this case, if you don't give it any information, it just knows that you want to destroy the laser that it's currently inside of. And we can run our game, and that should make sure that we don't get any, that we don't have any memory leaks now. They should be being destroyed outside of the game. Now let's create an enemy. So come to our objects. Oh, go on,
Very
Ben.
briefly, Ben, just following along as a complete beginner, a mistake I made was not ever assigning a sprite to the laser object. So I was wondering why nothing was appearing. So just in case anybody else has done that, assign your sprite to your laser object.
That's a good point, Ben. And it's also a good thing. It reminds me that I should mention that there is a visible checkbox on objects. And so if you by mistake uncheck this and you run your game, you will also notice that you won't be able to see anything even if you have assigned a sprite. So if you can't see anything, double check. Make sure that that checkbox visible is checked. Okay, so let's right click on objects, do create an object again. And this time we'll call this O underscore enemy underscore 1. And assign a sprite. We'll assign this red enemy. Oh, that one's called enemy 2. So I guess to keep things consistent, we should name it enemy 2. And for this enemy, we want this one to be pretty simple. We'll program some logic for it. We'll just make this enemy go downwards. And we can do this in the same way that we made the laser go upwards by manipulating the vertical speed. So instead of doing a negative number, which is up inside of GameMaker, we'll just add an event, do a create event, and we'll do a positive number. And I'm going to give it a value of 6. So vSpeed equals 6. So this enemy will just move downward with a speed of 6. Now we want to have this enemy be able to collide with the laser. And this is pretty easy in GameMaker as well. So we're going to add an event inside of our enemy. We'll add a collision event with the laser. And so this code right here will run when the two sprites overlap. The laser sprite or the laser object and the enemy object. Now, how do you know when they're going to overlap? And this is important to talk about here real fast. If we come up to our sprites and we click on sprite enemy 2, double click on sprite enemy 2. I'm going to hit F12 to give myself a little more room here. Inside of the sprite properties, there's something called the collision mask. And this collision mask basically tells GameMaker what should be used when determining collisions. And since it's a 2D game, it's just, you can see when I click on the collision mask, I guess, arrow right here to drop it down, it just draws a gray kind of darkened image over the sprite to show you where the collision mask is. For this type of game, and for actually most 2D games, I'd highly recommend using square collision masks, or rectangle. And the reason is because it's a lot faster processing-wise. However, there may be exceptions to this. You can manipulate these values too if you do manual instead of automatic for the mode inside of type. You can manipulate this square to make it any size you want, or this rectangle, using left, top, right, and down. But there are cases where you may want different shapes. So there is an ellipse shape, there is a diamond shape, there's a precise shape, which means it basically takes every single pixel and makes it precise. So for collisions, it will only detect a collision on the exact pixel of the sprite. But you can see all of these other options are slower. It's because detecting collisions on a rectangle is quite a bit faster. And most we're getting ASMR jokes. Are you from Discord? Most of the 2D games that have been made in the past used rectangle collision shapes anyways. So I highly recommend using them, but it is important to be aware of them, the collision mask for the sprite. Okay. Now if we come back into our enemy, if you remember, we were working on the collision with the laser and what kind of code is going to run inside of here. For now, let's just destroy the enemy. We'll just call instance destroy. Same function that we were using before. However, let's just show this real fast. Oh, I forgot we need to add some actual enemies into the game. So I'm going to scroll out here in my room, come onto the room, click on my enemy, and drag a few into the room. And I'm dragging them up like way high off the screen for now. That way it'll give me time to try and shoot at them while they're coming down. And you can see if you shoot them, they die. But the laser that hits them doesn't die, and you may or may not want that, depending on the type of game you're making. But for this example, I don't want it. So let's talk about instance destroy and how you can pass other information into it. So we can, inside of this, call instance destroy again. But we don't want to destroy the enemy. We've already destroyed the enemy. We want to destroy what it's colliding with. Now there's a special variable or key. It's definitely a variable inside of GameMaker. It's kind of a keyword too, I guess, called other. And this allows you to access whatever you're colliding with. And we can pass that into our instance destroy. So we can do instance destroy, which will destroy us, and then instance destroy other, which will destroy the laser or the thing that we're colliding with, whatever other is. Will I upload this stream? Yes. Yes, I will. And there you go. Now you can see the laser and the enemy are destroyed. Now our enemy also needs to be destroyed when it goes outside the room, because we don't want it, if it goes on in the same way that our laser could go on forever and use up processing power, we need to do that for the enemy. So we're going to add an event, and I'm going to show you the wrong way to do it. Well, not necessarily always the wrong way, but something that won't work in our current game, which is using outside room in the same way we did with the laser. And somehow I turned caps lock on. Okay. There we go. Now this won't work because our enemies start out outside the room. And so they get instantly destroyed. So the other solution is we can still use the outside room event if we want. But the solution is to put an if statement here. And just check the enemy's current position. So what we'll do is we'll check against its Y position. We'll say if Y is greater than. Now we need a way to determine the very bottom of the room. And there's a built-in variable called room height that we can use here. So if our Y is greater than the room height, and since Y is opposite, so down is positive, the bottom of the room is the room height. And the top of the room would just be 0. So this will give us the height of the room, which will be the very bottom. And we can just make sure that we only destroy the enemy if we're outside of the room and our Y is greater than the room height. And now they should be destroyed outside the room. And I want to add an event here inside of our player object. We're getting close to the end of our stream here. But I want to add an event where the ship collides with the enemy. So we'll add an event, a collision with the enemy. And we'll just say, first of all, we want to destroy the enemy in an explosion. So we'll say instance destroy. And then inside of here we can type other. And that will destroy the enemy when it collides with the player. Then we can also destroy the player. Instance destroy. And that will destroy the player object. The ship, I should say. So now if the player runs into the ship, it will destroy both of them. Okay, now we're getting close on how much time we have left, so I guess we can kind of decide how we want to go from here. I could rush a little bit and add an enemy spawner object and add some health to the ship. And probably that would be about the extent of what I could do in the next 10 minutes. I think that since people will be able to come back and watch this a little later, I think that might be a good idea. If any of you have questions in the live chat, just let me know. And I'll kind of try and answer those as we go since we're coming to the close. So we'll kind of do a little bit of a Q&A.
I have a quick question.
Oh, sorry, Ben. I was just going to say we can kind of do a little bit of a Q&A while I add some stuff kind of just on my own, not expecting people to necessarily follow along if we want. What was your question, Ben?
So mine was going to be, it's great that you showed us how to destroy objects once they leave the screen. How would we verify that that's happening? How can we tell by running the game that those lasers or ships are being destroyed? How can we kind of inspect the room at runtime?
Oh, that's a really great question. So there's a couple ways you can do it, and I'm going to show the most basic way first because that's always useful. Let's just use the enemies for our example. Come into our outside room. Inside our instance destroy, the most basic way to show information is with a debug log or a log message, or a console log, I guess. And you just call show debug message. And this just takes a message inside of here, and it's between, you can do it between double quotes like this. And I'm just going to say enemy left room and was destroyed. So this is the most basic way that you can confirm that that happened. But I do want to show a better way as well after this. So now that when our enemy, if we come down here inside of our output, you can see enemy left room and was destroyed. So this is the console output right here. And we can confirm that that was happening. That code is being run. Okay. Now the better way to do this, since logging messages to the console isn't always the best way, is with GameMaker Studio 2's debug mode. And this is actually one of the amazing things about GameMaker Studio 2 over GameMaker Studio 1.4 is the debugger is significantly better. So let's run this debugger real quick. And actually, I want to pause it. So we can just press pause right there. I'll press play. I was too slow though, the enemies got destroyed. Ah, there we go. Yeah. So I'm going to press stop and run this all one more time and just press pause. Okay. There we go. I paused it. And we're getting a collision right here. And inside of the debugger, we can have breakpoints that we've set and instances. You can see there's a lot of information down here, and if you don't like all this information down here at the bottom, remember that you can drag all of this out anywhere you want. These are docks that you can drag into any position and dock anywhere on the screen. But if we look at our instances right here, if we look at this list, you can see we have the ship, we have the enemy, and we have multiple enemy 2s right here. We can actually come into these and look at their variables and look at information about them. Like this. And get more information on them. So as we run the game, so if we unpause here, you can see that all of them get destroyed, and if we pause again and come back to our instances list, none of these exist anymore. And so you can watch that much better inside of our debugger. You can watch your memory, your frame rate, and the debugger inside of GameMaker Studio 2 is definitely an upgrade from GameMaker Studio 1.4. It's a much better tool, and I'm pretty excited for how that seems to be working. And that's how I would go about it. That's the best way to do it. You can do a console log, which can get you a long way, but the debugger is the way to go, I think. I'm just
Awesome.
looking through
Thanks, Ben. That totally answered my question.
I'm looking through the live chat here real quick just to kind of see how things are going. And it doesn't look like anybody... I'm trying to read questions. If you guys have questions, put them in the chat and I'll answer them. Yeah, the debugger is very, very powerful. I definitely recommend learning more about it inside of GameMaker Studio 2 because it's one of the amazing new features that comes with GameMaker Studio 2. So I'm going to, real quick, show how you might create a simple explosion effect. So I'm going to create a new object. Just name this object explosion. We'll assign our explosion sprite, or our explosion center sprite. I'm going to add a step event, and a step event inside of GameMaker Studio 2 runs every single frame. So you have the create event that runs only on the very first frame, and the step event that runs every single frame. And inside of here, I'm going to say if image alpha, which is a built-in variable that determines how transparent the object is greater than 0, we're going to subtract from the image alpha minus equals 0.2. Else, if we're less than 0, we can just destroy it. Instance destroy. So we'll check to see if we're greater than 0. If we're not, we'll subtract. If we are less than 0, the else case, we'll destroy this object. What this allows us to do is just create a fade effect on this. So let's go into our enemy, and when we collide with the laser, we can also create our explosion effect right here. Instance, create, layer, X, Y, instances, object explosion. Now if we run the game, when we destroy a ship, and I missed the instances again. Keep missing that S. When we destroy the ship, we should get an explosion that fades away. And that's obviously a very simplistic effect. You can create much more interesting effects than that. Let's do, we'll do one more thing because we're just about to finish up. I'll just create an enemy spawner because I feel like that would be an important part of this game. Now a spawner, we can, for our spawner object, we can use what's called an alarm. So first we'll in our create event, we'll set this alarm. We'll say alarm 0 is equal to, and for now I'm just going to use 30. There are better ways to do this than using a magic number like this, 30. But for now, this will be fine. Then I'm going to add an event. We'll add an alarm. Inside this alarm, we want to reset it, but we want it to be slightly variable. So this sets the alarm. It's like setting a timer for 30 frames. And then here, this says, okay, the timer has gone off. The alarm is going off. What do you want to do? Well, we want to reset the alarm again. And I'm going to set it between 30 and 45. So this will choose between 30 and 45, so it will do a slightly variable time. And then we'll also create a new enemy. So we'll say instance, create, layer. Let's see if I can get the right layer this time. For our X position, we want to do random room width. So this will choose a number between 0 and the room width, and it will be randomly chosen, and that will be our X position. So we'll create enemies from random X positions. Our Y position can be -16. That should be high enough off the screen. You could also do 0 here. We'll just do 0 for now. our layer will be instances, and our object will be object enemy 2. Okay. And I want to make sure that you can see all of this code right here. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. There you go. That's all the code in the alarm. Now we can come into our room and drag our spawner into the room. And instead of having these enemies up here, we can get rid of those. Our spawner should create enemies for us. And you can see the spawner is now creating an indefinite amount of enemies. It will go on forever, an infinite amount of enemies actually. And we've got, in about an hour, we've got a pretty basic little spaceship game. And I should also mention that I was trying to move rather slowly so that people could follow along. If you become quite familiar with GameMaker and experienced in it, you can actually create a lot more. You can create a lot more in an hour than this, and it's pretty amazing to work with that way. It's very, very fast for this type of thing. Small 2D games. It's quick. Okay, I can see Gerald has a question. He said, could you please explain alarms, their strengths and limitations? How many can you have? Are they local to each object or project-wide? Those are all really good questions. So they're local to each object, the alarms are. There are a total of 16 alarms per object that you can, well, I lied, there's 12, I guess. I thought there was 16, but it seems there's 12. So there's a total of 12 alarms per object. And some of the limitations associated with alarms would be you can't pause them. So you couldn't say pause an alarm. You could create your own variable and have it subtract every single frame and then pause that if you wished. So I know a lot of people choose to not use alarms because of that reason. But I find that most of the time I don't need to pause the alarms. Like for an enemy spawner. If you wanted to, you could pause the logic in the alarm. That seems a little bit weird, but there are ways around that. But that is the biggest drawback that I see with using alarms, is that you're unable to pause them. Good question. Looking through other questions, I think we're about ready to... Oh, I'm glad that you really enjoyed the stream. DJ Rodimus Prime XYZ. Do you release your games to the public? And if so, where can we find them? I have a few free games on itch.io and GameJolt. If you want to just search Heartbeast, you should be able to find them there. Yeah, I don't actually have any paid games that I've made on my own. Most of the games that I've made have been free. I also do a lot of stuff for the Ludum Dares, or Ludum Dare, however you want to say it. You should do more streams like this in the future, Ben and Ben. We are definitely looking at options for working together more in the future. We'll kind of see how that goes, and we'll let you know. Okay, I think for now I'm going to end the stream. I hope you guys all had a good time. Ben, was there anything else that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think we got it covered, Ben. That just really shows for a simple game like that how much easier that is than it would have been in Unity. So it's a lot of fun for me to go through. That's the first time I've ever touched GameMaker 2. So yeah, I really like it. I can see a lot of benefits there for those simple things, and awesome, really nice.
Yeah. So if you guys, like I said, I'll be uploading this video. I'll have it on YouTube later. You can watch it later, and the resources will be in the description if you guys want to follow along. Then, if you have more questions that I wasn't able to answer in this stream, feel free to comment on the YouTube video, and I should be able to answer them answer them there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys later.